to talk about another one, but
Go
I'm
for
making a break.
I'll just cut it. Yeah. Okay, that I'm slowly melting.
Yeah.
I promise I'm still paying attention. My back just hurts. You take your shirt off and turn it backwards.
You just
Yeah, just talk to the wall the whole time.
So some other ideas, thoughts I've had with the jury duty that I was on. One of the things that, when I still had my phone and I could send out messages, one of the things that I sent out was that I saw evidence of the lack of teaching civics in school. That at one time, there was a concerted effort in America to teach civics, and by civics I mean basic knowledge about how the country works, an appreciation in why we do things that we do, like jury trials and these sorts of things. And I saw a real lack of that education, and saw evidence for the diminishing of value of civic participation. Yes, it's this classic funny thing. Everybody wants out of jury duty. Well, do people really want out of jury duty? I actually saw a jury that showed a lot of evidence they didn't want out of jury duty. That showed a lot of evidence where people actually want to be part of the process and part of the system, which is something in the greater sense I've seen about America. I think people want to be actively engaged in the country that they live in, and it is political elites trying to teach them not to be actively engaged. Where it used to be the people, at least in charge, supported the concept of individuals understanding the system and being educated in it so they could be involved in the system. I saw people demonstrate. I saw people who got released from jury duty, which was good. Released from jury duty because of them obviously not valuing the process. Why they got eliminated, how, because we didn't really see, there were a few people who were released in a public way that we knew, okay, the woman who said, I haven't been to the grocery store in a year because of COVID, and I'm old and I'm afraid to be here. They said, okay, it's fine, we'll let you, was there any objections? No, okay, and she was out of there, got up and left the room. Okay, that's public. A whole lot of them went away just randomly because it happens where they go and do preemptory exclusions or whatever, where they can say, I want this person to go away and I don't have to tell you why. And each side gets the ability to do that, and they go back and forth, and people... And what happens is at the end, they just seat the people that got chosen from the front. You don't know why they skipped over those people. But it was interesting. I think the jury we ended up with was fairly good given the process. But it was amazing how many people were obviously didn't understand the value of what was there. In front of me was a woman from Central Washington University. She teaches health of some sort, and I'm making it some sort. I know where she teaches, but there are multiple areas of health on campus that are involved in health sciences and phys ed and engineering and all sorts. There's all sorts of, but she was a health-based person, and she was obviously not in support of us all being there at all. COVID is still going on, which at this point, okay, when we first went in, we were seated 6 feet apart in a giant room. There was plenty of room for us to be properly social distanced. Half of all Americans have at least one of the shots now. We all had masks on, and she was publicly dismissive of the whole thing. You could just, and I'm sitting right behind her. I'm watching her body language of, as things are discussed. I was like, there are other important things, like an American, a Washingtonian, a Kittitas County resident is on trial because he's been accused by the state of Washington of committing a set of crimes. Does that not matter? Does that not matter that that individual's life is on hold until we decide? The crime, which we decided was a crime, so now it is a crime, because he's convicted of it. He's convicted of a crime. The crime happened in August, but from August till now, he's been charged. He's been accused of a crime in that much time. And while he wasn't innocent in this case, had he been innocent, that's a long time to be under this cloud. And the idea that some people thought that this wasn't worthy of going forward, of taking any risk, these sorts of things, and go, no, as Americans, people sacrifice, and they sacrifice in multiple ways, and we exist because there are people willing to sacrifice. And some of those sacrifices are things like going to war. Some of those sacrifices are things like being a first responder and moving towards bad things happen instead of away, and towards danger. And some of them are things like being willing to sit in a room and listen to people talk for a couple of days and make arguments and decide whether or not you're guilty of a crime. And to me, it's wildly important. I was very cognizant of what it would be to be at the defendant's table if you were innocent. And the idea that this was an inconvenience that we all wanted to get out of. And we hate having to do jury duty. It's funny how many people openly express, God, I hate to do jury duty, but would want people like us on the jury if we were accused. They say, I've heard it said that juries are made up of stupid people who can't come up with an excuse to get out of jury duty. If that's the case, it's because we've dumbed our country down. We have lost all sense of responsibility that goes with the privilege of being Americans, and that for the system to protect you, you have to be willing to do your part, which means that when called upon to do something as important as pass judgment on the freedoms and liberty of a fellow citizen, you have a moral obligation to participate in the process. It doesn't mean to the exclusion of everything else. There were 50 people there. They needed 12 people out of 50. That lowers the bar for what sort of excuse is worthwhile to get out of. They made it clear, for instance, in the last year, because of COVID, medical appointments have been very hard to get. If you have a medical appointment you've been waiting for some amount of time that's going to come up in the next 2 days, you should leave. It's not, we can get somebody else to stand in your place. Don't get to the back of the line to get a medical appointment again, because people have been skipping medical appointments and people have been dying because they skipped medical appointments. It's not that kind of, but it is the kind of thing that says, no, we should be teaching people this is a privilege to be part of the process. It is not bad. I was blessed. There's no doubt about it. I was in a trial that from picking us to done took 2 days. Took less than 2 days. That the trial, a long trial, the bailiff was talking about, in really long trials, it very soon becomes an endless parade of getting up and going from the jury room to the jury box, to the jury room, to the jury box, to the jury room, to the jury box, because every time court wants to do something, the jury, it's very protected about what you see. Remember all the stuff you see on television of objections and all these things. A lot of it is when they say, can we approach? And they go up and approach and they talk about something. And what they're deciding is it fair for this to be held against this person or brought up in support of this person or whatever? And the jury can't know that. And a lot of the times they just ask the jury to leave, which means we go out and cross the hallway and go into another room and we sit down. And then we get up and we file back in order. I did a lot of following lines today, and you go back into the other room, and then they send you back to the other room, and you go back and forth. And I can only imagine on some nightmare trial that lasts months how many times you would do that. it would become mind-numbing. I just can't even imagine. This was short, but even in that case, fine, okay. There was repetitiveness. There were things that were unpleasant about it, but really the process was fascinating and interesting, and none of that even matters. It's important. It has to happen. And that without good people to do it, you only end up with people you wouldn't want judging you. And the power of a jury is immense. It's really extraordinary. I mean, to the point where in some cases juries make the decision to forfeit somebody's life, let alone freedom. I don't know. As a jury, we were not told what the potential penalties were. So I would hope this guy's going to jail. He beat her up. I'm hoping he's going to jail, but I don't know. I actually saw, I think the sentencing is tomorrow morning. I might go sit in the gallery, and because it's open and I'm legally allowed to go, I may go sit in the back and hear what happens there. But it's a big deal, and you have to go through a lot of work to get to go and represent people at Congress or those sorts of things. Jury is meant to be this random thing. It's meant to be everybody. And if it's gonna be everybody, they can't do paid pools and it's literally, we're going to randomly select a group of people. And it's not everyone, because they select out of in our area, if you have, I think it's the enhanced driver's license now has everybody signed up for it. So if you have an enhanced driver's license, you're on the list. If you're a registered voter, you're on the list. That's it. That's the pool they're picking out. So that certainly is not everyone. But to me, it's fine. I would be honored to be picked again at some point. I saw enough to see that there could be some nightmares. I mentioned you'd walk back and forth a lot. I could imagine cases that are really, really ugly. I could imagine the other one that concerned me was a juror or a couple of jurors who are irrational in decisions. I could see somebody who just could not be convinced of something. And in a criminal court, if it's 12 against 1, that's a hung jury, and that is zero decision. And you could have somebody. It's not that the group should be able to force the person into something, but you could have somebody unwilling to logically look at what you're talking about. And I could see how that could be a nightmare. It could be wildly frustrating. I could even see more how if you had two people land on the same cause, because now they'd have the emotional support of each other to become an us against them thing. And I could see how you would just have we had one individual who was more challenging to convince on a couple of issues than others, and to the point where the group was showing the initial stages of frustration. I was showing the initial stages of frustration of, we just talked about this, I thought we just decided this, and that it really, it became an interesting thing of 11 people trying to convince one person of something. And doing it because it was a good jury, it was a group of people who were very respectfully trying to reword the same things in different ways to figure out, because either we have to convince that person or they have to convince the 11 others. And on the other hand, I valued him, because if I was innocent and only one person thought I was innocent, I would hope there was somebody there who had the guts to stand up against the 11 other people. And that's what you're called upon to do. That's what the jury instructions call upon you to do, to vote your conscience. And at the end, after we had given our judgment, and it went to the judge went through and asked every single person in the jury 2 questions. Was this your decision? Was this the jury's decision? Did you make this decision? Is this how you chose? Yes. Is this representative of the whole group? It was definitely an opportunity to say, no, I got forced into this. Or to say, yes, this was my decision, but he got forced into this. It's definitely this fail-safe moment of a chance to bail out of what you of it and go, no, I think I got pressed into this. And I'll bet you you could find records out there of ones where it happened right there, where the person said, I went along with this, but no, I don't agree with this. And I'm sure they get sent back to then have the discussion again. And I could see how, gosh, there has to be some jury rooms that get heated, but it's so important. It's just not every talk about with Army stuff, with Army training. One of the things that's most unique about Army training was that it was life and death all the time. That Army training is different because you're training to kill people or you're training to stay alive. It's what you're doing. Obviously, not every activity is, but many more activities are actually life and death in the moment than anything that compares in the civilian world, because we're playing with equipment designed to kill people. We're carrying loaded guns around. You're doing things where mistakes kill people and people get killed doing it. It's this different environment where most people don't get to experience very many times in life where it's life and death. And some of us, I'll admit, I like that environment. I'm intrigued by that environment. Being a race car safety worker, which I do, part of that is being where life and death decisions are going to happen on a regular basis. You're going to, and it's volunteering to go out on weekends and make life and death decisions. That intrigues me, and not everybody would be intrigued. But jury duty was very interesting like that, because it was definitely an opportunity to be someplace where there's no doubt you're making decisions that matter a lot. And that you think about things differently, it clears your head. You listen attentively, I found, and it appeared to me that the whole jury listened attentively. I was surprised how many of the jury members took no notes, and it was, me being who I am, we used my notes a fair number of times where there was no other record. One of the ones, could the court reporter read this back to us? Yeah, that's bullshit, at least here. You can't do that. You couldn't get recordings of what went on. You couldn't get any of that. We got all of the evidence, so all the pictures and things we were shown, we got those. We got the 911 recording. Matter of fact, one of the only things we did as a group was listen to the 911 recording again. That was important to us. One, because we believe she mentioned some phones that were stolen. And I should tell you the story at some point, but she mentioned part of what happened in there, and it became important that she said that while she was upset and in the moment and all of that, so we listened to that. But there was also a wild amount of just being on our own and figuring stuff out, which meant there were multiple times where it said, but she said this, or but she said that, and just so happened I had written down exactly what she said. Especially because, and I was really glad at one point the victim had said something, and I wrote down the exact words as she said it. It just stuck with me. She said, he said, and I wrote down the words that she claimed he said. And a little while later, she said it again, but her exact words changed. And that mattered, and they would not have played that back for us, which it was interesting to find out. And it made me really glad I'd written it down. And I'd written it down because it mattered, and it came up in our discussions. And one person was saying, no, well, she said it. She said it a couple of times. And I went, oh, wait, she didn't say it a couple of times. She talked about it a couple of times. She said different things. Why? And then you get to go, okay, so she clearly said two different things. So why? Now it's a whole group of people going, yeah, but when did she say the couple of things? And why do we think she did? Is there a logical explanation for why? And that was the interesting part, is how much of it's not a computer thing. This was not robots sitting around going, they said this, so it means this. There was a lot of us thinking through and deciding, how does this connect to that? And what does it mean? And so, yeah, interesting experience. And again, I know I kind of wandered in this one, but two things. One, you should take the opportunity if you get it. it won't come up. This is maybe the third or fourth time I've been called to jury duty where I had to actually show up. I'm 50 years old. I remember multiple times I got called to jury duty in Montlake Terrace right after we moved to Lubbock. So I just had to tell them I'm not even in the same state. Then I got called to jury duty in Lubbock right after we moved to Oregon. And so I thought, this is an interesting pattern. I'm going to call to jury duty right after we leave a place. So those ones just didn't pan out. But I've since then been called a few times. And in all of that process, this is the first time I actually sat on a jury. So, and there were two people who'd sat on juries previously. Out of a lot of years represented in that room, there were a couple of people who I suspect were well over 60. And so I would say you're not going to get that many opportunities. If you get them, take them, and being selected for a jury is not such a bad thing. It's a unique experience that I hope people take and get to take.